If you have your Bibles, go ahead and open them. Get your notes squared away. We're going to start off in 2 Samuel chapter 18. We'll get there in a moment, and we're going to move around a little bit. If you're new this morning, we're so glad you were here. Welcome, 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 welcome. We know some folks are moving in from different places, different cities, different states. We are so glad you were here. Maybe you found us online this morning, just kind of stumbled upon us. Thank you. We are in love to engage and get to know you a little bit better. We are in the 6th week. Can believe it, 6th week of a series that we're calling Would You Rather? And if you're brand new, you can go back on our website. We catalog all of our messages. We have a YouTube channel. You can go there and catch up, and I would encourage you to think about doing that. We are talking about, and it's kind of been a series kind of building on top of each other, about how to make really great decisions and the importance of it. So before we go there any further, let's pause in prayer. God, we're opening your word up, seeking your guidance, your counsel. We're seeking your wisdom so we can move forward with our life, that we can learn how to make really great decisions, God, that honor you, that blesses our family, and kind of minimizes some of the problems, the riptides of life that some of us experience on a regular basis. So God, speak to us. Right now, we prepare our minds and hearts for whatever you would say. Speak to us, Lord Jesus. In your Son's name we pray, God. Amen. One of the things that makes it so difficult in making really good decisions today is what happened in the past. One of the things that makes it hard to have good discernment today about something you need to decide on today is that we often bring in the past, the decisions in the past, into the present moment, and they impact it. And every single one of us here in this room, online right now is joining us, we all have something in our life, in our past, we wish we could redo. Something we could undo. Something we could have undone, myself included. Almost a half a century ago, really almost a full half century ago, when I was a certified youth pastor, the pastor of the church got sick. And so we had his wife call me at 6 o'clock in the morning and said, "You're up, buddy." And that meant the associate pastor was gone. I had to prepare a message in 2 hours for the first service, which was 8 o'clock. Now I was kind of excited, but I was also intimidated. And I thought, what am I going to do? And I wanted to have a message that would be just unforgettable. And it was, but for the wrong reason. I decided I wanted to say, I was a youth pastor, so I was going to talk about youth and about passing on from the grown-ups a faith to the next generation. And I had this one little line in the message I repeated often, that if you want to share your faith, you have to share your life. If you want to share your faith, you have to share your life. And one time it came out, if you want to share your faith, you have to share your wife. Now I will tell you, after that came out, nothing else was heard the rest of the message. I was done. Nobody paid it. It was just so unnerving and shocking and all that sort of stuff. And in fact, I never let that down. If I was to go back to that little church today, there'd be somebody that would bring that up. That's kind of how that stuck. And next weekend, the pastor of the church, he brought it up himself. He said, we're going to have a meeting of the administrative board to meet with Rick, that is our youth pastor, about his new philosophy about marriage. And just about how long he's going to be on staff as our youth pastor. That was an unforgettable experience. We all have things in our lives we wish we could redo, undo, or have somebody maybe undo it for us. And because we have things in our past that won't let us go. Maybe for you, it was a bad decision that you made, and it just keeps rearing its ugly head. Maybe for you, it's something in your past that you didn't even do, that somebody else chose to do, and you're experiencing the pain and the suffering because of somebody else's choice upon your life. Maybe for some of you, it's an addiction, it's a habit, it's something in your life you're struggling with. Maybe it's a secret, a family secret that you've just been sworn to keep it secret, and it's been hauling and gnawing at you. We all have things in our past, and those things in our past can prevent you and me from experiencing joy in the present, from hearing from God in the present, and from making good decisions in the present because of the baggage and the junk of the past that goes with us in today. And we all do it. There is a power that the past has over it. Professor and writer Jerry Sitzer, he talks about that power of the past has two different ways that it controls us. And the first one is regret. Regret is about this thing that you and I have done that if we could do it over, we would do it over. We just would. And the way that this was personalized and verbalized is we say, if only. If only I'd been there. If only I hadn't said that. If only I had selected that college. If only I had chosen this career path. If only I had gone out with that person. If only I hadn't gone out with this person. And the Bible is full of stories of people who just live with this list of regrets. One of them you find in 2 Samuel 18 about a man that some of you heard of is David. He was the king of Israel during the golden age. I mean, they call it the golden age. Everything they touched just turned to gold. And David, though, made a very bad decision. He decided to seduce a married woman. He got her pregnant. And to cover it up, he decided he would have her husband killed out in battle. And even though he confessed his sin publicly, his political leadership was never the same. And not only that, it seemed like after that, he just continued to fail as a dad. And he has this list of failures as a father just followed him to the point that even some of his sons started turning against him. One son in particular, his name was Absalom. And Absalom turned against his own dad and is fighting his dad, and he gets killed in battle. And David gets the news. And listen to what David says when he hears the news about his son's death. It says, the king was shaken. He went up to the room over the gateway and he wept. And as he went, he said, "O son, Absalom, my son, if only I had died instead." How many of you have said that? If only I. We all have a list of if onlys. We all have a list of regrets. I know I do. If only I hadn't been so driven as a young dad with 3 sons. If only I had not lost my temper when I was tired with them, when they were teenagers and I blew up and I blew it. If only I had not said those spiteful words to Dallas out of just a moment of weakness. If only I'd have handled that meeting better. If only I made a better decision in that encounter with those people when I was having that conflict. If only I'd handled that situation a lot better, I wouldn't be here today. And I'm going to bet I'm not the only one in the room. That we all have regrets, if only, that if I hadn't have done that, if I hadn't have said that, things would be better today. The other thing from our past that has power over us is this word called bitterness. And if a regret is something that I have done or said in the past that's still carried in me this moment, bitterness is something that has been done to me. Bitterness is about something to where I have been wronged myself, where somebody has harmed me, and you grow bitter. There was a Cleveland Browns NFL fan by the name of Scott Insminger. And for those of you who are not familiar with NFL football, let me explain something. The Cleveland Browns have some of the most committed fans in all of sports. They are rabid fans for one of the worst teams in the history of professional sports. And just so you understand, this is not just kind of feeling, this is fact. One of 4 teams that have never won a Super Bowl. One of 3 teams that haven't had a winning record in the past 20 years. I mean, just terrible team. But Scott, he was a dedicated, committed fan. And every year he would send them a song that he wrote to inspire them to have a winning season. He would add his little advice on things they could do, that if they did these things, they would win. So you can imagine his frustration and growing bitterness when his favorite team lost season after season after season. And so when he's died, his family has had enough. And so they went public and they said, we would like for 6 Cleveland Browns to serve as the pallbearers for Scott so they can let him down one more time. You can find it on the internet. It was in the paper. The family actually did that. Can you imagine someone being so bitter? They go public like that. It's pretty easy to tell when someone is bitter. They're defensive. They're spiteful. They have an attitude. They play the victim card. They have this me against the world spirit. And the amazing thing about someone who is bitter, often they have the truth on their side. They have been wronged. Justice was violated. Somebody harmed them and they had nothing to do with it. But here's what you need to know. If you're one of these bitter people, bitterness will not heal the pain inside of you. It never will. And bitterness will not change the person who harmed you. It never will. Bitterness is like a poison. Once it gets into your soul and your body, it will spread throughout your entire being. And not only is it a poison, it's contagious just like joy, and it spreads. It can spread from spouse to spouse, from parent to child, from child to parent, from teacher to student, from boss to leader, to people they work. Bitterness is just a cancer. It's a COVID that will spread like wildfire. And the Bible's pretty clear about the danger of it. Over in the book of Hebrews, Hebrews chapter 12, one little verse about this thing called bitterness. We'll put it on the screen. You don't have to go there. It says, see to it that no one falls short of the grace of God, and that no bitterness grows up to cause trouble and defile many. Because it won't just defile you. It will spread and sabotage other lives, and particularly those in your family. I've seen it happen so many times. So here's the truth, our core reality this morning, before we get too deep in the message. Core reality. Bitterness cannot change the past, no matter how right I am. Some of you need to get that. It doesn't make any difference how right you are. And regret cannot change the past, no matter how sorry I am. Here's the bad news. You can't change your past. Your past is not going away. But here's the good news. God can redeem your past. And redeem does not mean that he erases it. That doesn't mean that it goes away and you start all over. Redeem means that God takes all the elements of your life, past and present, and what he hopes for your future, and he weaves them into a new story. And he gives you a fresh start into a new experience and a new life. And the question is, how does God do that? If God really can, how does it come about? Some of you are aware, if you've been in small group settings with me particularly, that I have a fondness for Henry Cloud. He is a psychiatrist and a great theologian, a great scholar of the Bible. I've read about every single thing that he has written. And when he talks about this thing called redemption, he sees 3 words that are in therapy and in this biblically that allows redemption to happen because of someone's past. And here's what it is in your notes. We're going to work through this morning. How can God redeem my past? Grace plus truth plus time. Now, if you're here this morning and you're someone who's bitter, or you're someone who has regrets that you cannot shake, if you have some baggage you continue to handle, carry it with you. It keeps rearing its ugly head in your life. And you're wondering, how can God do something about it? This is how. Grace plus truth plus time. And the order matters. So we're going to work through these 3 things in order, and we're going to begin with grace. Some of you think of grace in some very unusual terms. When I say the word grace, the first word that comes to your mind is forgiveness. For some of you, the first thought that comes out of my is a get out of jail free card. For some of you, it's a little thing you say before you eat your meal. But grace is much deeper than that. In your notes, grace, God's unconditional love, an unwavering faithfulness, regardless of your past. In John chapter 4, we have this little story where Jesus is going from Jerusalem into Galilee, and along the way, he goes to a place called Samaria. And there he comes to a little city, and he's hungry, he's thirsty. He goes outside to the well of the city, and he sends his disciples in to go get food. And while he is there at that well, he has the most scandalous encounter with a human being whose past was so horrific. It's the most important chapters in the Bible. So here's what happens. It says right here in verse 7 of John chapter 4, a Samaritan woman came to draw water where Jesus was. And she said, hey, listen, will you give me a drink of water? Jesus said, will you give me a drink? And down in verse 9, the Samaritan woman said to him, hey, you're a Jew and I'm a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink? This woman couldn't believe that this guy was talking to her. She was shocked because she knew the truth. See, in this day, some of you may not know that a Jew, a first century Jew, would not talk, would not hang out, would not look at, not address a Samaritan in any shape, form, or fashion. They would go out of the way to not bump into them accidentally. Not only that, the scriptures tells us 3 times in that little text, 2 verses, that it was a Samaritan woman. Back in that day, in first century, you and I think it's strange, but a Jewish male, this is true in many Middle Eastern countries, not just Jewish, a man does not speak to a woman in public. You just don't do it. There's a rabbinic passage called the Mishnah from the first century, and they put it this way right here. He that talketh much with womanhood brings evil upon himself, and neglects the study of the law will in the end inherit Gehenna. That Gehenna in the Greek is hell. In other words, pretty serious violation for a man to talk to a woman in public, and Jesus does that. There's a New Testament scholar by the name of Kenneth Bailey who spent 40 years of his life in Lebanon, in Egypt, in Israel, and Palestine, teaching and learning. And he said, in all my 40 years there, he writes, I never once saw this boundary violated, a male speaking to a woman in public. And not as just a Samaritan woman Jesus is talking to. Remember, if you go early in the story, you're going to learn this woman, she's going to get water at noon by herself outside the city. And the question is why? Because she's no longer welcome in the city. She's no longer to go with the women that normally would early in the morning. She's not welcome because she has a scandalous past. You learn about it later in the story, that she had 5 husbands, and now she's shacked up with a dude that's not her husband. This woman was an outcast. And I want you to notice that when Jesus confronts this woman, and she comes to him, Jesus does not dismiss her. He does not rebuke her. He does not turn away from her. He does not condemn her. He wasn't sarcastic. In fact, he gives her a gift. It says it right here in the Bible, verse 10. Jesus answered her, if you knew the gift of God and who it is that asked you for a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water. Now, if you can hear my voice right now online or in the house, and if you're a follower of Jesus Christ, I want to invite you perhaps to go back to that time in your life where your shame was bigger than your self-esteem. Where you felt so bad and so awful about who you were and where you've been and what you've done, and your shame, your embarrassment, you just was so. And then you yourself had an encounter with the Lord Jesus Christ. And all of a sudden you felt this relief. You felt this unbelievable weight just leave your shoulder. And you went, whoa, what a relief. That is exactly what this woman is experiencing right here in this text, in this moment. She can't believe it. She's been accepted. She's been embraced. She's been taken in by this man. Unbelievable. And he says, if you only understand the gift of God, if you knew the gift, you would just be, you would want more of this. It's very interesting. Jesus does not turn the woman away. He accepts her as is. As is. Some of you remember here just not too long ago when the housing was so crazy and people, if you wanted to buy a house, you had to offer $15,000, $20,000 more than market value. Remember how that was? I mean, it was crazy, right? But man, people were doing it. And in the contract, so often there you would be, when you buy it as is. That meant no inspections. That meant no guarantee money back. That meant you move in, the issues and problems that the previous owner caused, they're your problems. You now own them, they're yours. Jesus is saying, I love you, I accept you as is. Your problems are now my problems. Your issues are now my issues. That's what you call grace. Can't earn it, can't buy it. You can't find it anywhere out there in the world except through this man named Jesus. And grace, in your notes, must be received. That's it. Your past cannot get in the way of you experiencing God's grace. I don't care how bad your past is, the regrets, the bitterness, I don't care what has happened, it cannot get in the way of you receiving that grace. You know what gets in the way of you receiving God's grace? Your pride. Your ego. Your misunderstanding of your life. That you think what you need to do is you need to man up, you need to woman up, you just need to get better. You need to put up a front, show everybody you got it all figured out. And some of you say you're a follower of Jesus Christ and you still have that mindset. And if you have that mindset, this is one of the things that pops up in your head. You think, you know what, if I mess up anymore, then God's not going to love me. If I mess up, God, so I got to keep it quiet, I'll just keep it to myself, and I just got to figure it out and get better myself. But the Bible didn't say that. In fact, it's just the opposite. Over here in Romans 5, verse 20, we'll put it up here on the screen. It says, where sin increased, grace increased all the more. That means when you feel like you're worse and there's nothing God can do for you because you feel so bad and so sinful, God's feelings and passion and love for you is even greater. He just pours on more and more and more and more. You just have to accept it. Accept it. Let your pride down. Let your ego down. Let your manhood down if you have to, guys. Women, I can do this by myself. I don't need anything anybody else. And you can do it right now. You don't have to wait to some little emotional experience at the end of some sermon or some music or whatever. All you have to say is in your heart, and you say it over and over and over again until you really come to believe it. God, I just accept that you accept me just as I am. In fact, somebody can say that right now if you want. You can just repeat it after me right there where you see. God, I accept that you accept me just as I am. That's grace. It's God's unconditional love and his unwavering faithfulness to you, regardless of your past. That's God's grace. That's the first thing. The second one is truth. The second one is truth. So when Jesus is with this woman, he offers her this living water. She responds enthusiastically. Down in verse 15, the woman said, whoa, sir, this is awesome. Give me this water so I won't get thirsty and have to keep coming here to draw water. And he told her, go call your husband and come back. I'd rather not talk about that. Can we just get back to the living water deal? That sounded a whole lot better. He said, no, go call your husband and then come back. And she said, I have no husband. He said, you're right. You're right when you say that. The fact is, you have had 5 husbands. and the man that you have now is not your husband. And what you have just said, it is quite true. Now, for those of you who don't think Jesus has a sense of humor, tell me, what was the one thing this woman was trying to avoid? The truth about her past. And he brings it up. And she tries to give a little partial truth. Have you ever tried to do that? You ever tried to spin the truth? You ever just told part of the truth? Sometimes even with God. I mean, you know the truth, and God knows the truth, but you just kind of dance around it and really don't come clean and telling God the real truth. But Jesus says, no, we're going to deal with the truth. In fact, he says, the fact is, I love that little phrase in verse 18, the fact is, we're coming back to the facts. Here are the facts. You got to face the facts in your notes. The facts are of my past or my friends. You're going, what? To think about it. You go to your financial advisor, and your financial advisor tells you, listen, man, you're in good shape. You're going to be able to retire in style. I mean, your investments are doing well, your savings are strong. Man, you're good to go. And so you and your spouse, you go out on the town to celebrate. I mean, you get a big old bill, right? And you're just having so fun. The biggest bottle of wine you can afford, and most expensive, and man, you're celebrating, and it's over. You give your credit card. And the table server comes back very sheepishly and gives you the credit card back. I'm sorry, but it was declined. And you go, what? You go back and you check, and sure enough, your credit card is maxed out. You dig a little deeper, you discover that your savings are depleted, your investments are tanking, your house is about to be foreclosed on, and you go back to your financial advisor and you say, hey, why didn't you tell me the truth? He said, well, I didn't want you to feel bad. I didn't want to hurt your feelings. I wanted you to walk out of my office feeling good about yourself. Isn't that amazing about you and me? We want to know the truth about our financial situation. You want to know the truth. You want to know the truth, what the doctor has to say. Doctor, just tell me the truth. Cut to the chase. Tell me the truth. But when it comes to our past, when it comes to our bitterness, when it comes to regrets, we would rather just kind of dance around the truth because we'd rather feel good about ourselves and not feel all that yucky stuff we have to feel when we think about our past. My dad years ago told me, he said, Rick, the truth will set you free, yeah, but it'll make you miserable first. And some of you, some of us, we got some misery to go to before we get to the other side. Because saying the truth means saying out loud, God, I'm an addict. I'm an alcoholic. I betrayed my spouse. I'm skimming from my boss. It means saying out loud, I'm angry. I got a problem with, and I just want to make sure I'm angry at God. Sometimes church people don't feel like they can say, like you can't say stuff like that out loud. But I want to tell you, I declare right now, Pathway.church is a safe, free zone where you can say out loud your stuff, your baggage, your brokenness, your issues, and not be shamed, not be guilted, and not thrown under the wagon and cast aside. Because you need to say it. So if you've been messed up, you're hiding a sin, some sort of brokenness, it's time, as they say, to come out of the closet and let the truth be known. Because in your notes, grace must be received, but number two, truth must be acknowledged. God will not redeem what you won't acknowledge, what you won't admit, what you won't say out loud. One of the unspoken values in this group that I'm a part of called the executive leadership team of your church, That's 5 or 6 leaders of your church that meet with me almost on a weekly basis, sometimes more than once, to talk about the direction of the church and strategy. Been empowered by the session to have these kind of conversations. And we kind of have a deal. We make sure that we talk about the last 10%. Anybody ever heard that phrase, the last 10%? See, most people in their marriage or most people in their family or even in the workplace, they won't talk about the last 10%. I mean the thing that nobody wants to say. You'll talk about 70%, you'll talk about the 75%, and on a good day, you might talk about 80 or 85%. But there's a 15 or 10% you don't even bring up. You just want it to go away. Because if you bring it up, it'll be messy. If you bring it up, somebody's feelings might get hurt. So let's just don't talk about it. And that is why some of you, the past keeps showing up in your present. Because you never fully deal with it and admit it and enough. So many families have family secrets. So many issues keep over and over and over because you never talk about it and deal with it. The truth will set you free. It will make you miserable first. You've got to learn how to speak the last 10%. You've got to be able to hear the last 10%. And yes, there are better and worse ways on how you talk about the 10%. Charlie and Martha Shedd were great marriage gurus in their day, and we used them a lot around here when it was St. Matthew. They were so good to us, and they had this little thing that they would talk about when they had this big old fight where Martha put this note on the door on the refrigerator for Charlie. She said, "Dear Charlie, I hate you. Love, Martha." Now, there are better ways to speak the truth, the last 10%. And the Apostle Paul says to speak the truth in love. So I want to say something before I move on. If there's somebody here in the room, you're thinking about going to tell somebody the last 10%, I mean, they need to hear the last 10%. Before you do, if you're not saying in love, and if you're not willing the good for their life, I would encourage you to see the truth about your own heart first. To examine your own heart first. Because all you're going to do is create more bitterness, and you're going to have more regret. Speak the truth in love. You've probably heard this phrase, time heals all wounds. That's not true. Grace plus truth plus time. In your notes, time. God, not time, heals all wounds. God, not time, heals all wounds. In Luke chapter 13, we had this story where Jesus tells a parable. And in this parable, it's the man who has a garden. And in this garden, this vineyard, there is a fig tree. And it doesn't bear fruit for 3 years. And so the owner comes to say, hey, it's time to do something about this. And the owner shows up, and he says over here in verse 7, he said, for 3 years I've been coming to look for fruit on this fig tree, and I've not found any on the tree. Cut the tree down. Why should it use up the soil? And the caretaker of the place said, hey, sir, owner, leave it alone. Hey, give it 1 more year. I'll dig around it, and I'll fertilize it. If it bears fruit next year, fine. If not, then cut it down. The vineyard is your life, and you are the owner of your life, and Jesus is the caretaker. And here's the interesting thing about this parable. Some of you are more impatient with your life than Jesus is. You keep having the same problem, the same issue pop up over and over and over again, and you just say, I can't believe I'm dealing with this. I can't believe I'm still, what? Why? I just want to bury it, just ignore it. And Jesus says, no. Give me more time. Let me come into your vineyard. Let me dig. Let me water. Let me fertilize. And let's see what happens. You need more time. God's healing takes time. And it's not passive time. It's not just sitting and waiting time. If you go to your doctor and you have a bad shoulder and the doctor says, yep, you need a new shoulder, I'm going to give you a brand new shoulder. I promise you're going to be good as new. You go, really? Do it. He says, listen, before I do it, make sure you understand something. You're going to have months of rehab after I do the surgery, and you got to do the rehab. Hold it. Months. As in months, as in 30-day months, as in many of those? He said, yeah. That means doing things I don't want to do, exercises that are going to hurt. It means doing it when it's inconvenient and I don't want to. Yeah. If you don't do it, you won't heal. If you want to get well, you got to do the hard work of digging into the truth about your past and allowing Jesus to work in your vineyard along with him. So let me ask you, how many of you are doing that? Are you taking advantage of the time that God has given you? Because in your notes, time must be taken advantage of. Grace must be received, truth must be acknowledged, but time must be taken. So how are you using your time? Are you just hoping, God, that your past will go away? It will just don't talk about it, don't think about it, just go. Or are you spending time with Jesus talking about your past? Are you reading the Bible, letting the Bible speak over your past? Are you engaged in community with people who know you and love you, where you can talk openly and freely about your regrets and your bitterness in your life that you've not yet healed from? Are you involved with a counselor, a pastor, or something? Listen, if you're not doing any of those things, we would like to help you. Stop at our next step place and next steps, and somebody have a conversation with to get on with your healing and your growth. But you've got to do the work with the time that God gives you. It's just not going to heal by itself. In relationship with God, it can. Now I want to do something here before I get you out of here and pray over you. Because somebody in this room needs some encouragement, and it's going to take you helping them. I'm getting ready to go through 2 or 3 scenarios. And then I'm going to count to 3. 1, 2, 3. And on the count of 3, I'm going to ask anybody who's willing to stand up and to bear testimony that God has redeemed you and rewritten your story. If you're someone that was raised in a family that was dysfunctional, and you do not realize that it was wreaking havoc on your ability as an adult to be a healthy adult. If you were someone that was raised in a family where you had someone who was an alcoholic, an addict, and that it was a secret, and it just festered and just created all these sort of issues in your life when you became an adult. If you had a traumatic loss in your family when you were young, maybe the death of a child, a brother or a sister, some tragic act, some divorce that just was painful and ripped the whole family apart. Or maybe you did something yourself. You have regrets. You made a bad choice, a bad decision that really caused a lot of pain for a lot of people. But somehow, with God's grace and God's truth in time, now you have a recovery story, and you've been redeemed. That story's been redeemed. If this is you, would you please stand right where you are? 1, 2, 3. Would you stand? Would you stand? I want you to look around you. This is not just fluff. Thank you. You may be seated. Your past does not define who you are. You are not your past. You can be redeemed. And maybe someone today, right now, what you got to start with is just grace. And right now, you just got to stop right now and say, God, I accept the fact that you accept me just the way I am, past and all. Because that's where it starts. Accepting and receiving God's grace. Maybe for some of you, it's time to face the truth. Just to face the facts. The facts of it, whatever that fact is, and you got to say it out loud to somebody. You got to stop pretending, stop keeping it a secret, stop hoping it's just going to go away. Nobody will notice it, see that you're going to speak maybe to a trusted friend. Today you decide you're going to speak to a small group. You're going to speak to a counselor or a pastor. I don't know who, but you're going to say it out loud to somebody. And if you need help with that, stop by our next steps table. Somebody will be happy to visit with you. Somebody with a prayer stole. You can say it to them. Just begin the journey on getting healed. And maybe for some of you, it's just making a commitment this morning to invite Jesus to hang out in your garden. That is your life. Because being in a relationship with Jesus means dealing with the truth. And He can handle it. He can handle it. And He will speak over it and redeem it and do all these different things in it, but you got to do it with him. So maybe for you, it's a commitment to your life steps every morning this week. Because he is saying, hey, listen, you're not your past. Don't give up. Don't quit. Don't throw in the towel. Give me a chance. Let me see what I can do. And let's see if that tree doesn't start bearing fruit. Because you are not your past. Listen, if you're a follower of Jesus Christ, you are not damaged goods. If you know him, you are not dirty. You're not a failure. You're not a disappointment. You're not. You're a beloved daughter. You're a beloved son of the one true King. And there's nothing he will not do to bring healing to your life. I want to pray over before I let you go. God, we bring a lot of stuff into this room. Failure, mistakes, regrets, bitterness, old pains, old wounds, old fears. And we spend so much time and energy just praying that it will go away. We try to bury it. I don't want to think about it. I don't want to talk about it. Just let it go away. And yet it keeps on rearing its ugly head and messing up the now. But God, today we confront the hard truth that we can't change the past and we can't just make it go away. We can't redo it. We can't undo it. But in humility, we acknowledge, God, that our past, we own it. But God, we also claim and declare this morning that we are not our past, that because you came and because you died upon that cross, because you went into places like Samaria and you encountered women with scandalous past and you gave her grace, that you have grace for us. And so it's in your grace that we stand. And it's in your truth that we find comfort and clarity and redemption and hope. So in the days ahead, God, we commit to walking closely with you, trusting not in our faithfulness to you, but trusting in your unwavering faithfulness to us, that you will be with us and you will redeem us, and you will turn our past into a redemption story. God, may that be true for every single person who can hear my voice right now. We trust you with our past, and we trust you with our future. In Jesus' name, amen.